Greetings, everyone. I am the Hipster Snek. Allow me to begin today with a question. Have you ever really loved a long-running series and some installment, be it a season, character, or sequel, really was just a huge step down in quality? Yeah, that's Monster Rancher 3 in a nutshell, so let's get cracking. Yeah, no messing around this time. Just take a look at the game and witness the immediate downgrade in art quality. It looks awful. This is partly because during the console leap from PS1 to PS2 came the technique known as cel shading. This technique would eventually give us beautifully rendered games like Okami and Beautiful Joe, but when the technique was in its infancy, it was more prone to giving us shovelware like cell damage. Monster Rancher 3 falls firmly in that latter category, because while it certainly has that vivid pastel coloration, there's no shadows on anything, so it all looks like the Easter Bunny threw up on everything. The human characters look okay, and they're expressive enough for their designs to be largely forgivable, but this art shift for some reason, and I personally blame wanton toad licking, leads to a complete redesign of the iconic monsters of the franchise, and it looks horrible for the change. They all look like bootleg toy versions of their former selves. Monster Rancher was always on the cartoonish side of things to begin with, but this is going too far, and it just sucks out the cool factor all these monsters had. Dragons and Nagas look pathetic now, and gels look like textureless robin eggs with great big Pac-Man eyes, and the newcomer monsters Momo and Octopi are generic and ultimately wouldn't stand the test of time. They disappear after the advanced titles. And the sound, I just don't care for it much. Due to some details I'll get into momentarily, the music is much more repetitive than previous installments. It's not pleasant, and it's not planted firmly in the background where it should be. It pops a lot more, but not for a good reason. It's up and away the worst soundtrack the series has ever had to endure. I don't have quite the right terminology to describe it, but you'll soon see that a mediocre to poor soundtrack is far from this game's worst sin. Because this is all the stuff you realize before you even push a button, and it gets worse. Upon starting the game, we learn that Monster Rancher 3 is a prequel to the other games in the series, taking place some untold time before the modern world with an ancient civilization called the Tochika. We also learn that people outside Tochikan tribes aren't allowed to raise or regenerate monsters, much to our point of view character's discouragement. We're recruited by Flaria, a Tochikan herself, as we petition the Shrine Keeper, Bragma, to make us a monster as well. The one thing I will give this game is that Flaria does have a lot of personality. She's crass and very carefree as an assistant. She comes into her own memorable addition to the game's underwhelming and oftentimes poorly translated script. After we get our first monster, which due to the PS2's hardware upgrade can come from a CD or a DVD now, we also meet a gaggle of characters who act as recurring rivals, but chief among them being Gatomon. Yeah, I told you those names would become relevant, but how these three boneheads became revered as deities in the modern day is anyone's guess. And then gameplay begins, and bear with me because I have a lot to say on it. For starters, training's a complete mess. Instead of having a ranch, you start in a forest zone with 5 generic training options, one for each of your stats. And you heard me right, 5, not 6 this time, but I'll get to that in a sec. There are 5 training zones that you unlock over time, each zone corresponding to a different biome. There's Morks the forest, Kalaragi the jungle, Takrama the desert, Brillia the mountain, and Goat, which is underwater. Not a beach, it's actually underwater. And this leads to the first and most immediately obvious issue. Monster Rancher 3 does not use the cool hybrid system of the past installments. If you look for them, you won't find them. Monsters are instead read as species/biome, and not only does this make for the smallest number of monsters available in a Monster Rancher game to date, it's stupidly obvious they reuse designs from past games to fill in some of the biome niches for some of the species. This also means that monsters lacking certain traits, like for example resist cold, won't be able to train in say Brillia at 100%, just to name one issue. It's just another random, punitive way the game's new systems are all terrible. And that's to say nothing of the fact they clearly didn't care during the game's translation. There are several species names that are inconsistently translated from past games. Ducken from 2 was called Dakung in 3, which gets corrected in later games. Or they just get it wrong. The species that should be read Color Pandora, 2 words, is named Coro Pindora as 1 word. And their encyclopedia entries are rife with English, as is the main game's dialogue. And no, there's no monster fusion either. Instead, you work your monster to its dying breath, whereupon you get a heart crystal, which you then feed to a baby monster, transferring a portion of the elder monster's stats to the younger. And that pretty much means that subsequent generations are always going to be better than their predecessors, and not because of any particular skill growth on the player's part, it's just inevitable. But what really gets my underwater goat is that they try to execute a one with nature theme in this training. This ultimately doesn't work because instead of having the past installment issue of having training that's incomplete, you have it completely random and arbitrary. See, every seasonal shift you have to take part in a venture, as they call it, which really is just walking your monster around the area that it's been training in, so it loses quite a bit of the mystique that expeditions had. If you want to check more than one spot per venture, you have to pay to do this too, since you can't opt out. You'll be shelling some 1,000 to 2,000 golds every 3 months for, well, essentially stuff that you should be getting other places but can't. And that wouldn't be so bad if ventures were actually fun, but they're not. You see, ventures are actually quite bad. Best case scenario, you'll find the Noisy Hull, which is considered enough to always spawn in the same spots each season, and it will give you, wait for this terrible idea, attack experience points. Yes, your attacks can level up. That sounds great, right? Well, too bad. To get one attack level, you'll need to find the Noisy Hull a minimum of 4 times, and you can find 3 Noisy Hulls in one particularly successful venture. That's not so bad, right? Wrong. That's because Noisy Hulls drain your arbitrary venture energy source, so I hope you have several grand in gold just burning a hole in your pocket every season. And assuming you manage to get this far, then the upgrade the attack gets is random to one of 4 stats: damage, accuracy, guts drain, and critical chance. Meaning that on a streak of bad luck, you could get things like guts drains to attack that barely have it to start. Well, if improving individual attacks doesn't work, maybe the solution's to get new attacks. As soon as I figure out how, I'll let you know, because the system is equally awful as the one that preceded it. You need to get a skill item and then, on venture, find the Lord Monster of the Zone. I have completed this game twice over and never, despite a frankly ridiculous amount of attempts, have I ever managed to obtain a skill item even once. Oh, but ventures are not done letting us down just yet. You need to go on ventures to unlock additional training methods. Yeah, and it's a complete crapshoot. The trainings you get vary by area, and you have to find them with no particular hint on where they might be on any given venture. And on top of that, your rank of all things influences when you can get some of them. Got a monster who desperately needs a particular training type to get out of the rank he's stuck on? Well, that sucks for them because you aren't getting it till you arbitrarily inflate your rank. See the problem? Monster Rancher 3 is the last game of the mainline games that uses the rank progression system in any meaningful sense. But the biggest issue is it has too much hinging on it. Of the locked breeds in the game, only 2 are made available outside of rank progression, the Zan and the Joker. You get those by unlocking additional ranch zones and doing more terrible ventures and meeting with more terrible rival characters, and the difficulty scaling for them is completely random. Yeah, here's a spoiler alert, don't go to GOAT. Every single person there is A and S ranked monsters. Once, while raising a monster purely to see if they were any good, I went to GOAT, because that was the monster's biome type, and proceeded to watch as a conga line of random schmucks strolled up to my ranch and kicked the crap out of my baby monster relentlessly in a series of matches I couldn't decline or win. And since, once you start a plotline in Monster Rancher 3, you have to see it through to completion before others will start, doing this sort of thing can shut you out of progressing things, like the Zan and Joker storylines. As a quick aside, Monster Rancher 3 is also very, very buggy. There's an event in Kalaragi which will hardlock you into a particular questline if you lose against Gatamon's monster, which is roughly B or A rank constraint. And once that happens, there's no getting out of it, shy of loading your save. The game also suffers random slowdowns when you feed your monster, and a strategy guide that was made for it rife with incorrect information. True quality, am I right? Oh, actually, since I brought it up, let's talk about those rivals, shall we? Once you meet them, they'll randomly show up at your ranch, whereupon you can speak to them, which does nothing, try to trade with them, which also appears to do nothing, battle them, which gets you nothing, or tell them to go away, which at least results in golden silence. Problem is, once a rival character decides they enjoy randomly trespassing and harassing you, they'll begin showing up in tournaments too. Now, they're usually just as prone to losing as any other random AI enemy, but there's more than a few instances where one, typically Gatamon, will have a perfect win record every single time she enters the tournament, and thus you will wash out of any round-robin tournament if you lose even once because of her never-ending parasitic presence. Stop trying to siphon off me, you leech! So, let's talk about battles and how Monster Rancher 3 managed to ruin them too. For starters, let's talk about having only 5 stats: life, power, intelligence, speed, and defense. So what's missing? How about the entire stat upon which attack accuracy used to hinge? Yeah, that's a thing. Accuracy is now dependent on attack versus speed. Oh, and just because that grease fire of a recipe hasn't been explained quite well enough, improving attack accuracy is a matter of sheer randomness and hemorrhaging incredible amounts of gold, as I've said. And to top it all off, the game takes to actively mocking the player. Have a good look at this GUI. Look at this eyesore and tell me precisely where exactly my accuracy is supposed to be displayed. Do you see it? No? Well, it's this thing right here. This useless cell phone reception indicator right here. Man, that sure is helpful, isn't it? I just love how the guts meter in the useless button configuration option window eats 2/3 of the space allotted for useful battle data, so now I have only increments of 25 to work with if I'm guessing whether I'm going to hit or not. It's not like monster battles or mind games about when to wait and when to strike or anything. I mean, what's the difference in 52 and 72% in terms of accuracy anyway? With a GUI that's absolutely garbage, you might as well just flip a coin to determine if any attack lands. And without the accuracy stat, that's how the game feels too. Describing how fundamentally imbalanced this game feels is impossible. But let's try a metaphor and see if that gets the idea across. Imagine a Super Mario Bros. Sequel, but the conceit of this installment was that every time you press the jump button, your input became irrelevant and the jump's height and distance were instead drawn out of a random number generator. Imagine the game is designed to make this fact as infuriating as humanly possible. That's the combat in Monster Rancher 3. So, you want a way to make meaningful progress in this game. Is there perhaps somewhere in your movie collection a Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, Standard Edition DVD? Well, congratulations, that has a hinger. Hingers have the species trait Radar, which just flat raises their accuracy all the time, making them the best species in the game bar none. Congrats, now never raise anything ever again because all will fall before the robot overlord. Hingers have consistently good stats in everything, so when it's young, raise its speed, and as you crest into A and S ranks, just raise its HP and defense. Nuts to everything else, because if you want to waste your time beating this unholy random number demon, that's your best bet. Want a different type of Hinger than just the snow one? That's easy. Just feed it the local food stuff, the one that will change between the 5 locations, until it shapeshifts. Yes, it's that stupidly easy to fill out your monster encyclopedia in this game, almost like the dev team cared as little about shoving this game out the door as the writing staff did. And since this game is horrible, I have no problem spoiling the story for you. So if you don't want to hear it, and for some reason, despite all my advice, you're going to go ahead and run to GameStop and buy a copy of this because, I don't know, you have some kind of personal mortal sin you need to atone for, then stop now, but don't say I didn't warn you. For the rest of you, you beat the S-rank official tournaments and are told that each region has their own major tournament, comprising the Great Five. Your wins across them are cumulative, even if done across multiple monsters, so you really don't need to be rushed in tackling them. With each ending in a battle against a regional delegate thematic to each region, except Takrama, which has a rare breed of pixie for some reason. But who cares? None of those matter. Once you have all 5 crests, you then unlock the final battle. It's a one-on-one versus the rare black dragon Ragnaroks, a monster only capable of existing in the player's hands if you have a Game Shark because its stats sum out at over 3,400 points. And its attacks are such that, unless you have well over 500 HP in defense, any attack will just one-hit kill you, causing you to restart and sit through the unskippable wall of text that happens before him. After you eventually win, but God help me, I don't know why you'd bother, you get another unskippable wall of text, where every rival you have managed to make shows up and makes some kind of comment on you or Flaria, bringing this mess of a game to its end, which I'm assuming is not unlike that of Old Yeller. Oh yeah, and non-Tochikans can now raise monsters going forward, because we totally needed to know that bit of the lore, I guess? In the event I haven't made it perfectly clear already, Monster Rancher 3 is more than just a bad installment in a good series. It's a terrible game that unfortunately has to bear the moniker of my favorite franchise of all time on it. That's more than they tried something new and it didn't pan out. It's not just that the game looks awful. It's not just that the sound is mediocre at its best. It's not just that not a single gameplay element actually comes together. It's not just that it reads like a Hong Kong subtitled film. It's all that and so much more. It feels more on par with that rumor that Metal Gear Solid 2 was designed to deliberately tank and end the series. On one hand, it feels like the game was supposed to be baby's first Monster Rancher, but then the game is so horrifically lopsided and imbalanced that it feels like only a pro-veteran of the series has even the remotest chance of coping with the game's innumerable problems and eventually eking out something resembling the Pyrrhic victory that is beating Monster Rancher 3. I mean, sure, you'll probably eventually win, but then you'll have to look yourself in the mirror and admit to spending hours of your limited mortal lifespan playing Monster Rancher 3. In short, don't play it. Don't even look at it. Just pretend like it doesn't even exist. Thank you for joining me on my first attempt at giving a game a negative review. I might not have made this alone. As always, this is the Hipster Snek, and if you enjoyed my suffering, please make it worth it for both of us by clicking that like button down below, and maybe leave a comment on what you thought of this review's format compared to the others. If you haven't already, please tap that subscribe and bell buttons so you'll always know when new content's coming out. If you want to feed my pizza addiction and my future monsters, you can become a true subscriber of Snek at my Subscribestar page, link in the description. Join me next time as we dive headfirst into the best part of the PS2 trilogy, Monster Rancher 4, and I'll see you there.